So, Congress is reintroducing the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act, and Tulsi Gabbard, of course, opposes it
Of
now.
course.
The Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act of 2021 is pretty much the same as the one that died. It wasn't approved by the Senate last year. So these lawmakers have joined Durbin to support this. Last fall, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act, the DTPA, by a bipartisan voice vote, and U.S. Senator Ron Johnson blocked the bill from going to the Senate. Senator Dick Durbin, from a Democrat from Illinois, is one of the co-authors of the bill, and he held a conference saying, explaining why it was needed. He said, if we have taken our oath seriously to guard the United States against all threats of foreign and domestic, we have to include domestic terrorists as the latest threat and one of the most serious. The DTPA would create offices in the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, and the FBI that would assess and counter threats from far-right extremists. He said, we can no longer take it for granted that we're safe in the United States. Let's take domestic terrorism seriously and pass this legislation as quickly as possible. Okay, so that's that. And so that's what they're doing now. And if you go look at the tracker, I just wanted to verify, the whole point is to authorize domestic terrorism offices within the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, and the FBI to analyze, monitor domestic terrorist activity and require the federal government to take steps to prevent domestic terrorism. And if you go to the actual bill, it's new, and it hasn't. This is the basic summary, basically the same thing I just said. And it was introduced on the 19th of this month, and it's referred to the Committee in the Judiciary, and in addition to the Committees of Homeland Security and Armed Services, for a period to be subsequently determined by the Speaker, in each case for consideration of such provisions as fall within the jurisdiction of committee concern. So it's still got to go through the Senate. Again, it's still got to be past the House, it's got to go past the Senate, and then to the President, and then it will become law. It's going to pass the House, and chances are it's going to pass the Senate with a overwhelming support by the Democrats of the majority in the Senate.
What if it comes down to 50-50 and Kamala Harris got to come in and make the final vote on that? Wouldn't that just make you sick? Because then we asked her about civil liberties and how she feels about that. The Convo Couch asked her, and she was like, yeah, I'm still for taking down, Donald Trump's Twitter and, whatnot. So,
and for the conspiracy theorists, okay. Yeah. For the conspiracy theorists, they had the same bill, like I said, in 2020 before any of that stuff happened, right? And it died. So it's really interesting that they're still pushing this. And that back then it was HR 5602. And it's basically, it's basically the same thing that I just said. You can read through it, and I just wanted to point that out. And then if you go back to here, you can see that it was essentially the same requirements to expand the availability of information on domestic terrorism, as well as the relationship between domestic terrorism and hate crimes, authorizes those components within the Department of Homeland Security, FBI, etc. They must jointly report on domestic terrorism, including white supremacist related incidents or attempted incidents. Interesting that they had this before. And then it creates an interagency task force to analyze and combat white supremacist and neo-Nazi infiltration of the uniformed services and federal law enforcement agencies. This part is interesting to me, because when have they actually cared about what the police are doing to people? Because throughout last year, what was happening outside in the protests? This isn't about protecting Americans from neo-Nazis. This is about finding a way to spy on us, to curtail our civil liberties. And this is it's disgusting, because they had this way before that happened, and they listed every single incident, that it was a crazy, white domestic terrorist. They listed every single attack that some people say are false flags. Some of them, they've listed all of that as reasons. If you go read through the whole bill, they list every single one of them. And it's really interesting.
There's talk and language. When I was watching Lloyd Austin's hearing over there the other day, it was saying something about, 1 out of every 3 servicemen in the military has experienced some form of white supremacy or racism, whatnot. So they're also looking within their own, within their own military to kind of weed out people who they think might be a Trump supporter or whatever, or anything like that, who's very much against, questioning what the military is doing and how they're doing it. So it's an overall attack on the people right now, because the biggest threat to the United States empire, it's its own citizens, plain and simple. So the easiest way to keep control is to turn the people against each other. They're trying to incite another type of civil war, and it's really, really scary. Well, and they've been floating this idea since 2019, 2020, and now here it comes 2021. It's the same type of bill that they've been planning for a long time. So.
And what better way to use this to incite fear on people than use the excuse of misguided people, right? Because there are racists and white supremacists. If you look at this on the surface level, oh great, they're just going to take out people who are actual, Klansmen and who are Nazis, and yeah, that's good. But the problem is that it's going to expand beyond that, because the whole point is using those people as the bait to then get people to be okay and consent to this overreach. And then they're going to start going after everybody else, because that's what's happened before. I'm not making this up. We've been here before. This has happened before. And I just wanted to show the last thing was that it was introduced in the Senate on March 27th of 2019. If you recall, it was a Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act of 2019. It's the same exact thing. Now, this time, because of what just happened, it's going to be expanded. And this is what it looked like then. It was a Senate S894, because it was in the Senate, and there you go. And it's the same exact thing.
Mr. Sanders,
and if you look over here, Bernie Sanders was one of the people who introduced it. You can see Sanders was part of this, and I wanted to point that out because, again, a lot of people don't check what people like Bernie are doing, because Bernie says all these great things and does all these great things on like issues like Medicare for all and Green New Deal. But when it comes to things like this, why are you okay with censorship? You're voting with Booker, Duckworth, and Klobuchar on these things. And
I was going to say, too, isn't it just so crazy, fam, from 2016, when he was all about going in to talk to Trump supporters and talk to those people that thought differently than him? Why? Because he understood what the root of this problem was. It was people starving, fearful, ignorant, and then they turn to these groups of white supremacy because they feel left out in the cold, and they hate the person who they feel is taking away from them. But that's where Bernie Sanders, we thought, was going into to stop this stuff and say, hey, let's talk to each other. Let me help you out economically. Let's fix this stuff so there'll be less fear. There'll be less ignorance. Now it's all about, let's just cut it out and just weed them and whatnot, and not even realizing that the people are starving, and that's why they're starting to turn on each other, because they're economically starving. They don't have health care. They don't have a future. They don't own houses anymore. They're renting our generation. It's just an overall clusterfuck. And the parties that be, the Republican and Democratic parties, the elites, they're looking to benefit off this and pit the people against each other. And they're all going along with it. It's terrible. So
exactly.
Fam, real quick. So you're saying that these bills are basically going to increase surveillance, right?
Yeah, the same. So the new one is basically the same as this 2019 one, which is basically the same as the 2021. And you don't see the language for it yet because they just introduced it, right? Yeah. So they don't have it ready yet. But it's essentially going to be that plus worse, because this one is coming after the Capitol riot, the Capitol insurrection, right? So if you read through it's bad, because they're going to form not only the FBI, the Homeland Security, DHS, and FBI, but they're also forming a task force where they're going to teach people how to spot white supremacists. If you read through the whole bill, it's scary.
Yeah. It's not only about ratting on our citizens too. It's like they're
training people how to spy on them and rat on them.
Yeah, and all these other departments that they put in. What are they going to do? They're going to be paid. These new positions are going to be paid to infiltrate, to spy on our conversations, to go look at their Instagrams, to look at the citizens. They're creating positions within government, and what's their job? Go look at your citizens, find out which one could be a potential domestic terrorism. So privacy.
But some people
is going
might
away.
say that this is okay, just like how they were okay with like the terrorists, in
exactly.
9/11, right?
Right.
Because
that's the point.
we want to monitor these terrorists, right? But then what ended up happening was that the NSA was surveilling everybody.
Americans, tapping into your phones, spying on Americans.
And the language is the same. You're either with us or with the terrorists. Wait, let me do it, George Bush. You're either with us or with the terrorists. Can't fool me again. And what does AOC say? You're either with us or you're with the mob.
Right.
Whoa. Hello.
It's the same thing.
Same language. They're pitting the people against each other because we are the biggest threat to the empire.
And it has been a long time coming. As you can see, they have been formulating this for a while now. This is nothing new. The Capitol insurrection, which is why I think it was a giant psyop, gives them yet another excuse to say, now look, we've been talking about this. Now we need to do this now. These white supremacists got to be taken down. And nobody's saying that those people don't exist, but they're making it out to be like literally half the country, over half the country is a white supremacist. Like, that is impossible. That is insane. They're not, like, they know that people are upset and angry and ready to like go actually be against the government. And so they're doing this now. This is why they have troops in DC till March. Yeah. Like, they're still thinking something's gonna happen. Like, this is gonna come back and bite the left because they're already doing it. They're saying, oh, these anarchists are dividing the left, because the anarchists started whether you want to call them Antifa, they were all in black. They started protesting too and saying, fuck Biden, we don't want these people. They started protesting. I don't know if they were real or not, whatever the hell it is. There are people that are angry, and they're going to show you that they're angry because their concerns aren't being addressed.
Yeah. And how about the way they tie the whole election thing to the whole situation? Donald Trump was telling lies about the elections. He used that to incite violence at the Capitol and stuff. So now you can't even talk about elections too as well. You look at George Stephanopoulos going on there with Rand Paul and still like, you're an idiot. This is evidence free. You're a kook. You're an idiot for talking about these elections. They don't even want you to talk about those things in the mechanisms which they keep power. So they're lumping everything together. It's domestic terrorists. You can't talk about elections. They have to keep their power. Let's pit the people against each other. Let's create positions within the government to spy on U.S. citizens.
Before you go that, let's go to the Tulsi Gabbard thing.
Oh, okay.
Because that's part of this section.
That's right. I'll wait for tea.
Okay, so this is Tulsi on Tucker. I have the Twitter one, and then we have the full video. I just put the Twitter clip because we don't have time for the full video.
Yeah. Congresswoman, I appreciate your coming on tonight. So I don't think of you as someone given to hyperbole. You're not throwing wild charges out there. You measure your words. You said you are concerned that we are moving toward a police state. Tell us why you're worried.
Well, Tucker, the very first thing that any president does after they've gotten elected, any member of Congress, and every one of us who has served in the military, is we take an oath. And we swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The reason that this is the first thing that we do is because our Constitution is the foundation of this country, and who we are. It is what guarantees us our civil liberties, our freedoms that are endowed to us not by any man or person in government, but are endowed to us by our Creator. And so this is something that we must all unite around. This is something that we recognize, that those who stormed the Capitol on January 6th trying to stop Congress from fulfilling their constitutional responsibilities, they were acting as domestic terrorists, undermining our Constitution. As you pointed out in my video, those like John Brennan, Adam Schiff, and others are also acting as domestic terrorists because they are also undermining our Constitution by trying to take away our civil liberties and rights that are guaranteed to us. If you don't mind, I'd like to just quote John Brennan directly so that people can't say I'm taking this out of context. Directly, yes. John Brennan says, members of the Biden team who have been nominated or appointed are now moving in laser-like fashion to try to uncover as much as they can about what looks very similar to insurgency movements they've seen overseas, where they germinate in different parts of the country and gain strength and bring together an unholy alliance, frequently of religious extremists, authoritarians, fascists, bigots, racists, nativists, and even libertarians. This is the extent that they are going to try to undermine the rights and freedoms that are guaranteed to every one of us, and it's incredibly dangerous.
It is so dangerous, and it's also happening on a greater scale we've ever seen before, because as you point out in the video that I hope every one of our viewers will find on the internet, it isn't simply government officials and our intel and law enforcement agencies, it's also private businesses. It's these giant tech monopolies. What can the rest of us do to protect ourselves, to keep free speech alive in a moment when it's being crushed all around us?
First of all, keep speaking. I think this is the most important thing at a time when there is so much fear and threats and the kind of fomenting of fear that we're seeing coming from the likes of John Brennan. take a stand. We must all take a stand and unite
Amen.
around these principles in our Constitution and continue to speak freely, whether it be in person, on the street corner, or on these virtual public squares, these town squares that exist online. You know, big tech is culpable in this, in that they are using their monopolistic power to pick and choose whose voices are heard and whose voices are squelched, whether it's based on who they agree with, disagree with, political affiliation, who you voted for, or whatever. I think there are alternative platforms. I've got one on tulsi.locals.com. It's a place where people can come and speak freely and have open dialogue and conversation around different issues based on respect and this appreciation for our constitutional rights and freedoms. But I think most importantly, we need to urge President Biden and every member of Congress how critical it is they take a stand and denounce the likes of John Brennan and Adam Schiff's actions. Because if we do not, and if they do not, then this country that we love and cherish will no longer exist.
I think that's right. When you ran for president as a Democrat, I watched the leadership of the Democratic Party try to subvert your campaign.
Awesome. Okay, so Johnny, if you go to her tweet, because that's her Twitter, if you go back to her Twitter, she actually clarifies below the tweet that she misspoke and she didn't mean to, during this interview with Tucker, I misspoke when referring to the mob who stormed the Capitol and people like Brennan and Schiff acting as domestic terrorists. I meant to say domestic enemies because they're actively trying to undermine the principles, process, and liberties enshrined in our Constitution. The mob who stormed the Capitol by trying to interfere with our constitutional responsibilities of Congress, and Brennan and Schiff and others who are trying to undermine our civil liberties guaranteed to every American in our Constitution. So even though she's saying like, yes, the mob like did interfere, because they did in the legislative process, she's careful not to call it an insurrection because it wasn't. And she's saying, look, if they're going to call them a mob and you're going to say that they're interfering, then they're interfering too. So let's call a spade, and let's hit the brakes here, because what we're doing is we're expanding this mass surveillance state, and it's not okay. And like, you know, she talked about the voices that are squelched versus the voices that are amplified. Like, we know this is what's happening to us right now. This is what's happening to a lot of our friends in independent media.
This is something we always talked about, you know, when we went through this whole process, because coming from the activism world and the people who work for Bernie Sanders, and a lot of us who split off and some of us who went to Tulsi, they really thought it was about the candidate. It's not. It's about the issues. It's about what she's talking about right now. The language she's using, civil liberties. How many times do we make that joke? Fam, I'm a civil liberties guy, because I am, because I understand the dangers that could come of it right now. And once again, she is speaking that language. And put her aside for a second. What is she actually talking about? She's talking about the government coming together. Yeah. What Brennan said was scary, ladies and gentlemen. Scary. I mean, putting in libertarians in there.
Well, they're calling everybody a fascist now. They're calling us a Nazi or a fash and all this stuff. So we could technically classify under that if somebody hates us enough. You know what I'm saying? So that it's very dangerous to go down that road, especially when Pasta calls himself a leftist libertarian every other day on the show.
I do. I'm going to shave my beard right now and get rid of it because I don't want to look like a domestic terrorist. You know, I went to a Trump rally to cover it. So out of all the things that they said, is he white? Is he a libertarian? Did he go to a Trump rally? Does he have an American flag out? So I don't have the American flag, thank God, or the threat on me bullshit and stuff like that. But it's scary, man. Who can they come from? And if you're talking about creating positions within our government to spy on people, you know, those people are just going to be like cops, like detectives. They don't really care about right or wrong. All they care, like Kamala Harris, is getting the conviction, getting somebody arrested, getting somebody put in jail, because then they pat themselves on the back. I stopped a theft or a thief or somebody bad, and I put them behind bars. So they'll expand what people are talking about. You know what I'm saying? So if we're talking about, hey, man, you got to keep an eye on the government, what they're doing is bad. They're like, he's an enemy of the government. Throw him in jail. This is what he said. He twists his words. That's why seeing these leftists go along with this bullshit right now is scary in itself. The ones who praise, I don't care if you take Donald Trump's Twitter down. I'm glad a fascist Twitter got taken down. They don't understand how little nuanced they are and Pandora's box they opened up, because it's dangerous, and it's dangerous times right now because they are trying to incite a civil war against each other.
Exactly.